The day the stars came to Earth was not like any other. No one had expected it. Humanity had always looked up to the night sky, wondering if they were truly alone in the vast, endless universe. People had speculated about aliens, talked about UFOs, and imagined what it would be like if we ever made contact with extraterrestrial life. But when it happened, when the aliens finally arrived, it was nothing like the movies. It started quietly. One evening, the skies above Earth darkened, and for a brief moment, the sun seemed to fade, as if something massive had moved in front of it. People all over the world looked up and saw something they couldn't explain. A massive ship, unlike anything anyone had ever seen before, hung silently above Earth, blocking out the light. This was no ordinary spaceship. It was the kind of craft that could only be dreamed of in science fiction. The ship was sleek, dark, and enormous, its surface shimmering with strange colors. It seemed to pulse with energy, as though it was alive. No one knew what it was or where it had come from, but one thing was clear: it was not from Earth. The news spread like wildfire. The world's best scientists, military leaders, and government officials quickly scrambled to figure out what was happening. Satellites attempted to scan the ship, but their readings were inconsistent and strange. No one could understand the advanced technology that the ship represented. It was clear that whatever these aliens were, they were far beyond anything humanity had achieved. The world's governments called an emergency meeting. Military forces were put on high alert. The United Nations convened to discuss the best course of action. Some leaders wanted to take a more peaceful approach, hoping to make contact and find a way to communicate. Others wanted to be ready for a fight, worried that the aliens might be a threat. After all, the ship was hovering above Earth without warning, and that alone was enough to raise concerns. Captain Rachel Hayes, a seasoned leader in the military, was one of the people called to the meeting. She was a no-nonsense kind of woman, tough but fair, and one of the few who had the courage to speak her mind when things got heated. Rachel had seen her share of difficult situations, but nothing had prepared her for what was about to unfold. When she stepped into the meeting room, she found herself face to face with representatives from every corner of the globe. The room was tense, filled with uncertainty and fear. Rachel knew that no matter how advanced these aliens were, they were still just that, aliens, and if humanity was going to survive, they had to approach this with caution. The world leaders were divided. Some suggested sending a delegation to make first contact, while others called for a show of military strength. The debate raged on for hours, but Rachel stayed quiet, waiting for the right moment to speak. Finally, when the room grew silent, she stood up. She had a calmness about her that made everyone listen. We can argue all day about what we should do, but the truth is, we have no idea what these aliens want. We don't know if they come in peace or if they're here to conquer us. What we do know is that we're humans, and we have something they don't: the ability to adapt, think on our feet, and most importantly, the ability to connect with others in ways that no other species can. The room fell quiet. Everyone knew Rachel was right. Humanity's strength wasn't in brute force or technology. It was in the unpredictable ways humans could solve problems, make allies, and survive against all odds. It was decided then and there that Rachel would be the one to represent Earth. She would lead a team of experts, including diplomats, military strategists, and scientists, to make contact with the aliens. There was a sense of fear, but also hope. Maybe they would be able to communicate with these visitors. Maybe they could even forge a peaceful relationship. But there was also the very real chance that this could all go terribly wrong. As Rachel prepared for the mission, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to walk into something far bigger than anything she had ever experienced. The unknown stretched out before her like a vast, dark ocean, and she was about to sail into it. That night, as Rachel lay in her quarters, she tried to sleep, but her mind raced. She thought about her family, her team, and what was at stake. The fate of the entire world rested on her shoulders. She didn't have any answers yet, but she knew one thing for sure. She would not go down without a fight. The next morning, she boarded the shuttle that would take her and her team to the alien ship. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and as it lifted off the ground, Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. The spacecraft was right there, above them, still hovering ominously in the sky. It was even bigger up close than it had seemed from the ground, and its surface seemed to ripple as if reacting to their presence. The shuttle docked with the alien ship, and a hush fell over everyone aboard. The air felt thick with anticipation. Would the aliens be hostile? Would they even want to talk? They waited, and the door to the shuttle slowly opened. Rachel was the first to step out. As her boots touched the metal floor of the alien ship, she felt a strange hum beneath her feet. It was as if the entire ship was alive, alive in a way that no human-made craft ever could be. The walls were smooth, dark, and glowing with an ethereal light. Strange symbols were etched into the surfaces, symbols that no one on Earth had ever seen before. They were led down long, winding corridors by robotic beings, silent, unblinking entities that moved with precision. Rachel couldn't help but wonder how these beings fit into the grand puzzle. Were they servants, guardians, or something more? After what seemed like an eternity, they arrived in a large, circular chamber. In the center of the room, there was a raised platform, and on it stood a tall, imposing figure. She was a woman, but not like any human woman. Her skin was a shimmering silver, and her eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Her hair, if it could be called that, seemed to float around her head like strands of energy. She was beautiful, yes, but there was an aura of power about her that was undeniable. Rachel took a deep breath. This was it, the first alien they would meet, and she had no idea what to expect. The alien woman's gaze swept over them, cold and calculating. Then, to everyone's surprise, she spoke in perfect English. "You must be the humans," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Tell me, what makes you worthy of existing in the galaxy?" Rachel steadied herself. The pressure was on, but she had trained for moments like this. She stepped forward and spoke with confidence. "We are humans. We don't have the power of advanced technology like you. We don't have the centuries of wisdom that you've gained. But what we do have is something you might not understand. We have heart. We adapt. We survive. And we fight for what's ours." The alien woman blinked, clearly taken aback by Rachel's response. There was a long pause, and Rachel could almost feel the alien woman's mind processing her words. Finally, the alien spoke again, though her voice had softened. "You are an interesting species. Perhaps I misjudged you." Her tone was still cold, but Rachel could sense a flicker of something else, curiosity, maybe even respect. Rachel couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. She had said exactly what she needed to. But she knew this was only the beginning. Whatever came next would be even more challenging. The fate of Earth and humanity's place in the galaxy was hanging in the balance. The Valseri had been watching humanity for longer than anyone realized. They were a race of incredibly advanced aliens, with technology that seemed like magic to human eyes. Their ships were fast enough to travel between stars in the blink of an eye, and their weapons were capable of obliterating planets in seconds. They had conquered countless worlds, and their empire spanned across the galaxy. But Earth was different. The Valseri had never encountered a species quite like humans before. In their eyes, humans were primitive, fragile, emotional, and unrefined. They had never expected us to be a threat. So when Captain Rachel Hayes and her team boarded the alien ship to negotiate for Earth's survival, the Valsari were calm, confident in their power. They believed the meeting would be short, and that Earth would quickly submit to their rule. The first few hours on the Valseri ship were tense. The alien woman, the leader of this delegation, had been polite, even respectful at first, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. She didn't say much, preferring to observe. Rachel couldn't help but notice how the alien seemed to study her every move. It was as if she was trying to figure out what made humans tick, trying to understand what made them different from every other species they had encountered. After what felt like an eternity of awkward silence, the alien woman finally spoke. "You've impressed me, humans," she said, her voice smooth but laced with an edge. "You're resourceful, adaptive, but I still believe you're far beneath us. I will test your worth. If you can prove that your species has more to offer than brute force and emotions, then perhaps I'll consider sparing your planet. But if you fail..." She let the threat hang in the air, the coldness of her words sinking in. Rachel's heart pounded. There was no turning back now. She and her team were about to face an unknown challenge from an alien race that had seen and done things humanity couldn't even imagine. Whatever the Valkyrie had planned, it was sure to be a test unlike anything they had ever faced. The first test was presented in a large high-tech room, illuminated by strange blue lights. The walls seemed to shimmer, like they were alive. The air was thick with a hum, a vibration that made Rachel's skin tingle. It felt as though every step she took was being watched by 1,000 unseen eyes. "This is the trial of mind and will," the Valkyrie woman said, her tone cold and unyielding. "You will each face a series of challenges designed to test your intellect, your ability to adapt, and your willpower. Fail, and your planet will belong to the Valkyrie. Succeed, and perhaps I will consider your species worthy of life." The humans exchanged nervous glances. They weren't sure what to expect, but they were all ready to give it their best shot. Rachel stepped forward, her face set in determination. She had seen her team face impossible odds before, and she wasn't about to back down now. The first challenge was a maze, but not the kind you could solve with a simple map. This maze was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. It was alive, shifting and changing as they walked through it. Every time they thought they were close to an exit, the walls would move, trapping them in a new section. The floor beneath their feet seemed to tilt at odd angles, forcing them to find their balance. The air grew thicker with every step, making it harder to breathe. At first, the humans tried to approach the maze logically, analyzing each turn, looking for patterns in the shifting walls. But nothing made sense. The walls weren't following any predictable rules. There were no markings, no signs, no clues. It was as if the maze was alive and had its own will. And with every wrong turn, the walls seemed to get tighter, closing in like a trap. Rachel stood still for a moment, trying to steady her racing mind. "All right, team, let's take a step back," she said, her voice calm despite the pressure. "We're thinking too hard. This isn't about following a pattern. It's about understanding how to move with the maze, not against it." One of her team members, a young engineer named Tom, looked around nervously. "But how are we supposed to move with it? We don't even know where the walls are going." Rachel smiled, a glint of humor in her eyes. "Sometimes, the trick isn't to find the way out. It's to stop fighting and see what the maze is trying to show us." The team watched her as she took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a brief moment. Then she moved forward, not with haste or urgency, but with careful steps. She felt the subtle shifts beneath her feet, listened for the smallest change in the hum of the maze. It was a risky approach, but Rachel knew that if they kept trying to outsmart the maze, they would only get more tangled. Soon, the others followed her lead. They stopped trying to figure out a way to win, and instead focused on understanding the flow of the maze. It was like dancing with the walls, letting the maze guide them rather than forcefully finding a way out. And after what seemed like hours, the walls began to open. The pressure lifted, and they emerged into a large open room. The Valkyrie woman, who had been watching from the shadows, seemed impressed. "You humans are strange," she said, her voice almost curious. "I did not expect you to succeed so quickly." Rachel shrugged, a wry smile playing on her lips. "We do things a little differently." The alien woman nodded slowly, acknowledging the human ingenuity. But she wasn't finished with them yet. The next challenge was a test of endurance and willpower. They were brought into a large chamber with a series of objects suspended in midair. Each object was strange and unfamiliar, glowing with an eerie light. The Valsari woman explained that each object represented a different test, one of patience, one of strength, and one of focus. To pass, they had to manipulate these objects in ways that no human had ever done before. Your final test, the alien woman continued, her voice almost softened, is to show me what makes you laugh. What in your world can make you truly laugh with joy? Because in my long life, I have never witnessed such a thing. Rachel blinked, feeling the weight of the words sink in. Laughter. Was this a joke? She and her team had been tested in ways that seemed impossible, solving impossible puzzles, surviving challenges that defied logic, facing their deepest fears. But now the final test was about laughter. She exchanged confused glances with her team. They had expected something dangerous, something more typical of the challenges they had already faced. But laughter. How could that possibly be a test? One of her team members, Dr. Emily Rios, a renowned psychologist who had been part of the mission, spoke up. Wait, are you saying that we need to make you laugh? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. The Valsari leader nodded, but there was no amusement in her eyes. Yes, you will show me laughter, the kind that makes you forget yourself, the kind that connects you to one another, to your world, to your spirit. If you cannot make me understand this, then your planet will not survive. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. The stakes had never been higher. This wasn't about strategy, technology, or logic. This was about something more personal, something human. A few moments of stunned silence passed. The team stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Rachel could sense the tension in the room. Every member of the team was questioning the same thing. Laughter. What could possibly make the Valsari woman, an ancient and powerful being, laugh? They had no clue. Then Rachel had an idea. All right, everyone, she said, breaking the silence, her voice filled with a sense of determination. If we're going to do this, let's remember that we're human. We don't need to solve a riddle. We don't need to impress anyone. We just need to be ourselves. Her words gave the team a renewed sense of purpose. They knew they couldn't treat this like one of the physical or mental challenges they had faced before. This was different. They weren't solving a puzzle. They were about to show something completely alien to the Valsari. Human joy. Rachel turned to her team. We've got nothing to lose, she added with a grin. Let's show her what we've got. One of her crew members, a tall, easygoing man named James, raised his hand. I've got it, he said excitedly. Let's tell her a joke. The others stared at him, unsure if he was serious. But James had a way of making everyone laugh, even when they didn't expect to. He had a gift for making people feel at ease, no matter the situation. Rachel's face brightened. Go ahead, James. It can't hurt. James cleared his throat dramatically, standing a little taller. He had everyone's attention now. The Valsari woman stood still, her expression unreadable, waiting for the humans to begin their attempt at making her laugh. James smiled, almost mischievously, and then he delivered his joke with perfect timing. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? He paused for a moment, letting the silence stretch just long enough for the team to lean in, curious to hear the punchline. Because he was outstanding in his field. The entire room fell into silence. Even the Valsari leader seemed unshaken, her expression still as cold as ever. The humans waited for a response, exchanging nervous glances. There was no reaction, not even a hint of a smile. Rachel's heart sank for a moment. It had been a good joke, right? Maybe not the funniest one, but surely something could make the alien laugh. But it was clear the Valsari woman didn't understand. Or worse, she didn't find it funny. But then, something unexpected happened. The Valsari leader's lips twitched. It was so small, so quick that Rachel wasn't sure if she had imagined it. But then it happened again, a subtle movement, this time more noticeable. The alien's eyes widened slightly, and she quickly looked away, as if trying to hide her reaction. For a brief moment, Rachel thought she saw something in the alien's eyes. It wasn't disdain. It wasn't even confusion. It was surprise, a flicker of something like recognition. And then, before anyone could say anything, the Valseri leader did something no one had expected. The first object was a glowing sphere that hovered a few feet off the ground. At first glance, it looked like a simple ball of light, but as Rachel reached for it, she could feel a wave of pressure against her hand, as if the sphere was resisting her touch. The harder she tried to grab it, the more the sphere pulled away, as though it were alive. "Touch it gently," one of her team members whispered. "It's like a force field or something. Don't try to force it." Rachel nodded, adjusting her approach. She slowly reached out, barely brushing her fingers against the sphere. To her surprise, it didn't resist. Instead, it floated gently towards her hand, as if acknowledging her patience. She held it carefully, feeling the warmth radiating from it. The Valseri woman watched, her eyes narrowed. "You may have passed the first test, but can you do it again?" she asked, her tone laced with challenge. The humans exchanged glances. They were unsure if they could replicate the same calm focus. But Rachel was determined. She gestured for them to continue. The next object was a shifting, liquid-like mass that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It constantly changed shape, flowing like water yet resisting any attempts to touch it. The team tried everything they could think of, reaching out with their hands, using tools to stabilize it, even attempting to catch it with their bodies. But nothing worked. Finally, Rachel took a step back and observed. She realized that the object wasn't meant to be controlled. It was meant to be understood, to be experienced rather than mastered. She extended her hand slowly, gently guiding the liquid mass with her mind and senses, not her force. After a few moments, the mass stopped shifting and seemed to settle into her grasp, like it was finally ready to interact with her. The alien woman's eyes widened. "Incredible," she whispered under her breath. "You have passed the second test, but there is still more." Rachel and her team had proven themselves in ways the Valseri had not expected. Each challenge they faced, they met with creativity, teamwork, and patience. But the final test would be the hardest of them all. It was one that would test their very humanity, their ability to think beyond logic, to trust each other and themselves when all hope seemed lost. As they moved into the final room, the Valseri woman turned to them. "The last challenge is the most difficult. You will be faced with a choice. Choose wisely, or your planet will fall." Rachel stood tall. She had no idea what the final test would be, but one thing was certain: they were ready for whatever the Valseri threw at them. After completing the intense tests laid out by the Valseri, Captain Rachel Hayes and her team stood in a strange yet serene room. The challenge had been daunting, and each of them had given their best effort, solving puzzles, enduring mental and physical hardships, and even manipulating objects that seemed beyond human understanding. The Valseri woman, who had been cold and calculating at first, now looked almost intrigued. But that wasn't the end. There was one final test left, and Rachel knew that the fate of Earth hung in the balance. The alien leader stood before them, her glowing silver skin and eerie, piercing eyes giving her an otherworldly presence. The room they stood in was quiet, almost unnervingly so. The walls, which had once been alive with movement and strange energy, now seemed still and unchanging. The only sound was the soft hum of the ship itself, an endless, subtle vibration that made everything feel slightly off balance. "Humans," the Valseri leader's voice echoed. "You have done well so far, but your final test will require something more than intelligence or physical strength. It will require something that no other species has been able to show me. Something more fundamental." The alien's gaze swept across Rachel and her team, and for a brief moment, Rachel felt an unsettling sense of uncertainty. What could be so fundamental that the Valseri hadn't yet seen in them? They had already proven their strength, teamwork, and adaptability. Was there more to being human than they had realized? She laughed. It started as a soft chuckle, a sound that was so unexpected that it caught everyone off guard. The laughter grew louder, deeper, and for the first time since meeting her, Rachel saw the alien leader's face soften. Her icy composure cracked, and in that moment, she was no longer the powerful, intimidating being that had tested them. She was just a creature laughing, a sound so pure, so unguarded, that it echoed through the entire room. The team looked at each other in disbelief. Had they really just made an alien laugh? The Valkyrie leader wiped her eyes, as if trying to regain control of herself. She looked at Rachel and her team, her expression now one of genuine surprise. That was unexpected, she said, her voice still trembling slightly from the laughter. I never thought I would experience something so trivial, so human. Rachel smiled, her heart swelling with relief and pride. Sometimes the best things in life are the simplest, she said. The Valkyrie leader nodded slowly, her expression turning thoughtful. I see now, she said. Laughter is an expression of life itself. It is joy, unplanned and pure. It connects you to one another in ways that logic or force never could. Rachel felt a wave of satisfaction. They had passed the test, not with strength, not with intelligence, but with something uniquely human. Laughter had done what brute force and technology never could. For the first time since arriving on the alien ship, Rachel felt a sense of hope. They had not only shown the Valkyrie something new, but they had reminded her of something important. The power of joy, of laughter, of human connection. The Valkyrie leader, still recovering from her laughter, looked at Rachel and the team with a newfound respect. Perhaps I misjudged you, she said quietly. You are more than I expected. Your planet, your species, may yet have a place in the galaxy. Rachel's smile widened, the tension that had been building for days finally starting to ease. She had done it. They had done it. Humanity had passed the test. And in that moment, Rachel knew that Earth's future had just changed. The laughter still echoed in the alien chamber, but the Valkyrie leader, though visibly lighter after the unexpected outburst, wasn't about to let them off that easily. Rachel and her team had passed the test of laughter, something no one thought would be a part of their survival trial. But now they were faced with something much more familiar, something that would truly test their intellect and mental endurance. The room began to hum again, this time more intensely, as if preparing them for the next challenge. The Valkyrie leader stood tall, her posture still commanding, and her eyes were no longer just cold, they were also assessing. Laughter was an unexpected response, she said, her voice still carrying a slight tremor from the earlier emotion. But now, we return to what matters. The mind. The intellect. Rachel knew this wasn't going to be easy. Their previous challenges had tested their physical and emotional endurance, but this one felt different. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about winning through thought alone. It was time for the team to prove what humanity's mind was truly capable of. The room around them transformed. The walls shimmered as though reality itself was shifting. A series of symbols appeared, floating in the air in front of them. They were complex, abstract designs, unlike anything Rachel had ever seen. At first glance, they looked random, unorganized, chaotic even. But Rachel wasn't fooled. She knew that every challenge had a pattern. If she could only figure out the logic behind this, they could conquer it. These are the trials of the mind, the Valkyrie leader continued. You will solve the puzzles before you, but these puzzles are not merely for the intellect. They are designed to test your thinking, your ability to adapt and innovate. You will not succeed through brute force or emotion. You will succeed through your understanding of the world and how it works. The clock will begin once the first puzzle is revealed. With that, the symbols began to shift, revealing a large floating screen. The screen flickered for a moment, and then displayed a complex, multi-layered problem. A mathematical sequence of symbols, shapes, and numbers that seemed to make no sense at all. For a moment, The team stood frozen, staring at the puzzle, unsure of where to even begin. The mathematical symbols made no sense. There were geometric shapes that were supposed to interlock in a specific way, but there was no clear direction. Rachel's mind raced. They had to approach this logically, but logic didn't seem to apply here. The patterns were unlike anything they had seen before. "Focus," Rachel said, breaking the silence. She turned to her team. "We've faced worse. We can do this." Her voice steadied the others. They needed to stay calm, to think things through. She glanced at Dr. Emily Rios, the psychologist, who had been observing the puzzle with a focused expression. "Emily, any ideas?" Emily took a deep breath and stepped closer to the floating screen. "I think we need to break it down. We're looking at a combination of geometry and numerical sequences, but it's not just about numbers. It's about spatial understanding and patterns. The symbols weren't just numbers. They were shapes, interconnected in a way that hinted at a more complex structure. The sequence seemed to change at intervals, some shapes growing larger while others shrank." Emily continued to observe, her mind racing. "I think these shapes are meant to represent concepts. They might not just be static images. They could symbolize a process, a flow." Rachel nodded, trying to piece everything together. "So the puzzle is about understanding a process, not just solving a problem." Emily's face lit up with realization. "Exactly. Look at the way the symbols shift. There's an order, a rhythm to it. The shapes are transforming, but they're all following a hidden rule." The team gathered around the screen, each person trying to understand the flow of the symbols. The sequence of numbers had a rhythm, like a heartbeat. It wasn't random. It was just hidden under layers of complexity. Tom, the young engineer, stood back, watching the others. What if the trick is to think beyond the shapes and numbers? What if the solution lies in the way the symbols interact with each other? Maybe they're connected by something else, like energy or even time. Rachel looked at Tom, impressed by his insight. "You're right. These symbols aren't static. They're changing. They're alive. We need to understand why they're changing, not just how." As they continued to observe the puzzle, it became clear that there was something more going on than they initially thought. It wasn't just about numbers. It was about understanding the flow of time. The shapes weren't static. They represented moments that were unfolding. Each shape interacted with the others in real time, creating a flow that moved like a river, constantly shifting and evolving. Rachel's mind clicked into place. Wait, the puzzle isn't about what's there. It's about what's missing. It's about the empty spaces, the moments between the symbols. We have to figure out what happens in the gaps. The realization hit like a lightning bolt. The gaps weren't random. They were the key to understanding the puzzle. Every time the shapes shifted, the gaps between them created a new pattern. If they could understand the logic behind the gaps, they could figure out the missing pieces of the puzzle. The team worked quickly, adjusting their focus to the spaces between the symbols. Emily, Tom, and James worked together, drawing connections between the gaps and the shapes. They started to see patterns emerge, new sequences of numbers, new shapes forming out of the spaces. As the seconds ticked by, the puzzle began to make sense. The geometric shapes began to align with the numerical sequences, and the gaps between the symbols revealed their purpose. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Emily reached out and tapped the final part of the puzzle. The symbols on the screen shifted one last time, and the puzzle locked into place with a resounding click. The screen went dark, and for a moment, there was silence. Rachel's heart raced as she looked around at her team. Had they done it? Had they solved the puzzle? Then the Valseri leader's voice broke the silence. "Impressive," she said, her tone acknowledging their success. "You have solved the first part of the challenge. But the mind is not just about logic. It is also about adaptability. You must now face the second part." The room shifted again, and this time, a new series of screens appeared. Each one displayed an entirely different kind of problem. an abstract representation of a challenge that seemed impossible to solve. There were no numbers now, no obvious patterns. Instead, they were faced with a maze of thoughts, hypothetical situations that required not just knowledge, but imagination. The Valsari leader continued, "The next challenge is not just about solving puzzles. It is about seeing beyond the obvious, thinking in ways that are not linear. You must show me that your species can think in abstract terms, that you can innovate, that you can adapt to the unknown." Rachel's team looked at each other, their minds already spinning. The puzzles had tested their intellect, but this challenge was different. It wasn't about solving problems. It was about creativity, about thinking outside the box, seeing the world in a way that even the Valsari couldn't comprehend. Rachel took a deep breath. "All right, team, this is what we've been training for. Let's show them what humanity can do." As the puzzles continued to evolve, each more difficult than the last, the humans realized that the Valsari weren't just testing their intelligence. They were testing their ability to innovate under pressure, to think in ways that were impossible to predict. This wasn't about knowing the right answer. It was about creating the right answer. One by one, the team took turns solving the abstract challenges, using logic, creativity, and even humor to think their way through the puzzles. It was the hardest thing they had ever done. But with each success, they came closer to proving that humanity's greatest strength wasn't just intellect, it was adaptability. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last puzzle was completed. The symbols on the screen vanished, and the room went silent once again. The Valsari leader stepped forward, her face unreadable. "You have done more than I expected," she said, her voice softening. "You have shown me that humanity is not just capable of surviving. You are capable of thinking in ways I have never seen before. Your minds are unpredictable, creative, and flexible. Perhaps you truly are worth sparing." Rachel's heart swelled with pride. They had done it. They had faced the impossible and come out victorious. Their minds had proven to be as sharp and capable as any alien intellect, and they weren't done yet. The room was still. The team stood in silence, catching their breath after the intense mental challenges they had just overcome. The Valsari leader, who had been a cold and distant figure when they first arrived, now stood before them, her expression thoughtful. They had passed the test of the mind, something that not only challenged their intellect, but also their ability to innovate under pressure. Yet, Rachel could sense that the most difficult challenge was still ahead. The Valsari leader's gaze swept across the team. "You have impressed me," she said, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of something new. "Respect, perhaps. Your minds are powerful, adaptable, and clever. But now, I will show you that your greatest strength is yet to be tested. The final test is one you cannot prepare for. It is not about intellect or physical prowess, nor is it about emotion or creativity. It is about something far more powerful, something that even you may not recognize in yourselves." Rachel felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The previous tests had been difficult, each one a battle of will, intellect, or endurance. But now, they were faced with something more abstract, more dangerous. What was this final test? And what was this greater strength that the alien leader spoke of? The Valsari leader extended her hand, and the room around them seemed to change once more. The walls that had once been a blur of shifting colors and lights now solidified into a transparent dome, revealing the vast, star-studded expanse of space outside. Rachel could see the distant glow of galaxies, the stars swirling in their eternal dance. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. It was a reminder of just how small they were in the grand scheme of things. "You are in my domain now," the Valsari leader said, her tone low and commanding. "I am not merely an observer. I am the one who has the power to shape your fate, to destroy or to protect, to allow your planet to thrive or to wipe it from existence." Rachel's heart raced as the words sank in. The stakes had never been higher. Earth's fate rested on this moment, and the Valsari leader had just made it clear that their survival depended on something they had yet to understand. The team looked at each other, their faces a mixture of confusion and determination. What could this final test be? What weapon could they possibly have that would impress someone as powerful as the Valsari? Then, something unexpected happened. The Valsari leader snapped her fingers, and the ground beneath them began to shift. The floor opened up, revealing a dark, endless pit beneath them. The walls of the chamber trembled, and a low rumble echoed through the air. The team instinctively stepped back, unsure of what was happening. "This is your final test," the Valsari leader said, her voice now cold and commanding. "You will face the ultimate challenge. The pit beneath you is the last trial. It is not simply a test of your physical abilities or mental strength. It is a test of your will to survive." Rachel's mind raced. What kind of challenge could this be? The pit seemed endless, a dark void that threatened to swallow them whole. There were no obvious solutions, no way to escape. It felt like the perfect trap.